If you'd like to read along with me, Job chapter 1 and verse 1. Talk about Job a lot. Definitely one of the most used accounts in the scriptures. Today we're going to actually read a fairly lengthy reading, but we're going to get the first part of the story down today and actually read it. So we talk about it, we paraphrase it, but let's actually read it this morning and use it as a basis, not really to talk about Job, but to talk about something else. And I give you a hint. We were singing that song about don't forget to pray. When life seems dark and dreary, don't forget to pray. Let's see what it says in the book of Job. It says, there was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job. And that man was blameless and upright, the one who feared God and shunned evil. And 7 sons, 3 daughters were born to him. Also his possessions were 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and a very large household, so that this man was the greatest of all the people in the east. And his sons would go and feast in their houses, each on his own appointed day, and would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. So it was, when the days of feasting had run their course, that Job would send and sanctify them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, it may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus Job did regularly. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan, where do you come? So Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro on the earth, and from walking back and forth on it. I like to paraphrase that part by Satan saying, I've done walked all over your world. Okay? Verse 8. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and shuns evil? So Satan answered the Lord and said, does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge around him and around his household and around all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But now stretch out your hand and touch all he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your power. Only do not lay a hand on his person. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. Now there was a day when the sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And the messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them when the Sabeans raided them and took them away. Indeed, they have killed the servants with the edge of the sword. And I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another also came and said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them. And I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 bands, raided the camels, and took them away. Yes, and killed the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another also came and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, and suddenly a great wind came from across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell on the young people, and they are dead. And I alone have escaped to tell you. Then Job arose, tore his robe, shaved his head, And he fell to the ground and worshiped. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this, Job did not sin nor charge God with wrong. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. And Satan came also among them to present himself to the Lord. And the Lord said to Satan, from where do you come? Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro on the earth, and from walking back and forth on it. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? That there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil, and still he holds fast to his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him without cause. So Satan answered the Lord and said, skin for skin. Yes, all that a man has, he will give for his life. But now stretch out your hand and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will surely curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, he is in your hand, but spare his life. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with painful boils from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. And he took for himself a potsherd and with which to scrape himself while he sat in the midst of the ashes. See the picture. Then his wife said to him, do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die. But he said to her, you speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we indeed accept good from God and shall not accept adversity? In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. Appreciate your patience here. You know, from a human standpoint, Job was set up for suicide. Look at all the things that happened to him. Can you imagine? And I've known people that have gone way down in life, what we would think of as having to go through bad problems. This morning, if you're not having any problems, be patient, right? They're coming. You know, we all have problems. And some to a lesser degree and some to a greater degree. But the storms are coming, and we have to figure out a way to get through the storm. That way is not the way of suicide. We hear about and read about every year people who get to the point of desperation that they take their own lives. It's a major cause of teenage death today. A few minutes before he leaped to his death, a young man in New York said, I wish someone could convince me that life is worth living. Well, the police tried to convince him. Others spoke to him as he perched on that narrow ledge of the building. But it was all in vain. They talked, and finally he plummeted to his death on the sidewalk below. It said that there's one suicide every half an hour in the United States of America. And we say, why? What are the causes? Well, sociologists and psychiatrists tell us that one of the reasons is physical illnesses, or the fear of serious illness. Another is financial adversities. Another, frustration, loneliness, and purpose purposelessness, not having a purpose in life, having no aim in life. But far beyond all those other reasons or potential reasons is that people do not learn to give love and people do not learn to receive love. That's a lot like gifts, actually. That's a whole other sermon. I know a lot of people, very good people, that know how to give gifts but don't know how to receive one. Know a whole other group of people that know how to receive them but don't know how to give them. It's the same thing with love. We have to be able to learn to give it, and we have to learn to receive it. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, at the very end of that chapter, it says, "Now abide faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love." In a sermon from Henry Drummond called "The Greatest Thing in the World," it has this quote: "It is better not to live than not to love." Well, what are the factors that cause people to take their lives? It's said that it's difficulties, sufferings that break people down. And undoubtedly, that's true. The philosopher Immanuel Kant had this to say about that. It says, "The dove might consider that the resistance of the air is a problem, something to overcome, and yet that resistance of the air is what makes flying possible. And even our modern jets must take off against the wind, getting the maximum resistance of the air. Yes, it is true that resistance is difficult to overcome, and yet that same resistance is what makes flying possible, both for the dove and for the planes, and I'm convinced that resistance is what makes triumphant living possible for us." This is what the Apostle Paul said by inspiration in 2 Corinthians 11, 24 through 27, recounting some of the things that he had to go through in his life. "Of the Jews, 5 times received I 40 stripes, save one. There was I beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. Thrice I suffered shipwreck. A night and day I have been in the deep. In journeyings often. In perils of water. Perils of robbers. Perils of my own countrymen. In perils in the city. In perils in the wilderness. In perils in the sea. In perils among false brethren. In weariness and painfulness. In watchings often. In hunger and thirst. In fastings often, in cold and nakedness." What a list of sufferings. And yet in 2 Corinthians 12, verse 10, here is the inspired reaction of Paul from all those things. He says, "Therefore, I take pleasure in my infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecutions, in distresses, for Christ's sake, for when I am weak, then am I strong." You know, our Lord never promised that if we followed him, we would have a life with no problems. We're never promised a rose garden, if you want to talk about the popular song from a long, long time ago. It's not always that rose garden. Sometimes we have suffering. Sometimes we have to go through pain. He never promised that the Christian would always have good health, would always have their financial orders ordered, and would be able to always prosper in every way. But Jesus did say in Matthew 16, 24 and 25, "If any man come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whosoever shall save his life shall lose it. And whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it." It is true that difficulties and sufferings do sometimes break people down, but they do not need to. It is also said that affluence and luxury break people down. And that is also true. In fact, many people put too much emphasis on material things. And if that is our aim in life, then we will not all, we too may have to play out the scenario of the person who feels like there's no reason to live. Because if you're like Job, look at what Job lost. Look at what he lost. Not only what he went through, but what he lost. And yet, he realized that he didn't lose everything. He realized that he was able to go through everything that he had to go through. One of the wonderful things about the book of Job, and like I said, that's just an example for this morning. Now, we're not really talking about Job, is the fact that he said at the very end of his life, after he went through all that, his friends came to comfort him, by telling him what a bad person he was. I mean, he had everything going for him, didn't he? And yet, he said about God, he said, I had heard of you with my ear, but now I see you. I see you with my eyes. Job saw something that he had not seen before. What a wonderful end to that story. What people need to hear is the teaching of Jesus in Luke 12, verse 15. Take heed and beware of covetousness, for a man's life does not consist in the abundance of things which he possesses. They need to read about what Solomon said in Proverbs 30, 8 and 9. Remove from me vanity and lies. Give me neither poverty nor riches. What a wonderful lesson we had on that video last Wednesday night. Neither poverty nor riches. Why? Because poverty can break a person down, but so can riches. Sometimes things that we think are going to be good don't end up that good. But notice the end of the passage, feed me with food that is needful for me, lest I be full and deny thee, and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and take the name of my God in vain. 1 Timothy 6 through 11, Paul presented this thought, but godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and it is certain that we can carry nothing out. And having food and raiment, let us therewith be contented. But they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, which while some coveted after, they have they erred from the faith, and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. So it doesn't really matter whether you have a little or a lot. It's how you react to it. And that which is needful, feed me with that which is needful. That is what sometimes even we don't even understand what we need. Do you always understand what you should pray for? I don't. And that usually a lot of times I pray for what's best. I say, God, whatever is best, please do that. Because I don't know. And I find myself in that situation a lot. How is life worth living? I want to take a look real briefly at four things, four different suggestions that are scriptural suggestions that no matter what we're going through, no matter what we're suffering, no matter what storm is sitting at our door, to think about at least these four things. Because the idea, the very prospect of a person stepping out on a ledge and saying, convince me that life is worth living, and if not, I'm going to jump from this ledge. No one should ever find themselves or allow themselves to be placed in that sort of a situation. Four things. Number one, be dependent on God. You know, sometimes we're dependent on so many other things. We don't give a thought about who's really in control. God still rules in the affairs of man. Never forget that. He's in control. In the story of Job, who was in control? God was. Is it a mystery? How, the things, why did Job have to go through all that? Why? We see some of the background story, but there's a lot of things that we still don't understand. That the question, they call it the question of evil. When bad comes in, why do bad things happen to good people? That's the real question. Why did all these things happen to Job? Never forget that God is everywhere. Never forget that even though we don't understand the answer to everything and the reason for everything, we need to remember that there is a reason. And that God only allows what is needful for us and that which is ultimately good for us and for all of mankind. Wow, that's a big thought. I totally realize that. But it's something to think about and consider, that we are dependent upon Him. God who is aware of a sparrow that falls. God who knows the number of hairs on our head. I used to know a guy that didn't have too many hairs, and I'm like, that's no big deal, right? It's a little joke. He knows the numbers of hair on everyone's head. I don't know that. He's concerned about our good. He's concerned for the benefit of all of us. He knows that we need His guidance, and He has given us His guidance. Don't ever think that life is not worth living without presenting yourself before the guidance that God has left for us. In Jeremiah 10 and verse 23, it said, "O Lord, I know that the way of man is not in himself." People tell you, you want the answer? Look inside. Here in Jeremiah, he says, the answer isn't in there. It's not within man that walketh to direct his own steps. It says, David said in Psalm 23, verse 4, "Yes, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." Always realize that God walks with us, no matter where we walk. The valley of the shadow of death. Brother, I'm in the valley of the shadow of death. But you can walk through it with God. God will lead us through the valley of the shadow of death. We do not have to stay camped there. When Jesus left the earth in His ascension, the last thing that He said, the very last thing after He gave the Great Commission, He said, "And lo, I am with you always, even until the end of the world," or the end of the age. Christians can be comforted by Philippians 4, 6, and verse 7. "In nothing be anxious, but rather in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God, and the peace of God, which passes all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus." That we can let inside of us. That answer, that result, that peace of God that you cannot explain in an understandable way can be ours. The greatest deterrent from suicide today is a strong Christian faith. It's to believe that God said it, I believe it, and that settles it. Yes, I know. God said it, and that settles it. That's part true too. And that is the big truth statement in that the fact that I believe it makes a difference for me. God said it, I believe it, and that settles it. And that makes a difference for me, and it can make a difference for you. The Apostle Paul said that this resilience that faith brings, 2 Corinthians 4, verses 8 and 9, "We are troubled on every side, and yet not distressed. We are perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, cast down, but not destroyed, because God is with us. Verse 16 and 17, he continues, for which cause we faint not, but though our outward man perish, yet our inward man is renewed day by day. For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, worketh for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. And there's something to be said about that. We'll get that. I've got 3 more reasons this morning, just suggestions for us to think about when we're going through troubled times. Number 2, a willingness to accept our lot. I think one of the things that's sadly lacking in our world today and even in our society is the ability to realize that reality is reality. And you cannot live a life outside of reality and expect to find answers that lie within the sphere of reality. This means our pain, suffering, and disappointments, as well as the good things that we receive in life. We receive a lot of things, both good and bad. It'd be difficult to accept poverty when all around us are wealthy. It would be difficult to accept illness or suffering when everybody around us has robust health. It is difficult, but it is possible. It is possible to see that has been that which has been given to us, whether good or bad. And there is a reason, there is a purpose for everything. It is possible to accept our lot in life, what is given to us. Job accepted it. He didn't even understand it. I doubt that we understand it ourselves. You know, we're getting to see behind the curtain in the book of Job. He couldn't see behind the curtain. All this bad stuff is happening to him, and he has to say, why? Why is all this? But we know that there was a reason. It's possible to do that if we accept God's set of values, and if we don't just look at the physical side of life. Sometimes things are not as bad as they appear. Have you ever had that? You thought things were going to be horrible, and then you look back and you say, hey, I made it through that, and it was tough, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, right? That happens. The opposite happens. Things are not as good as they appear to be. We think this is going to be a piece of cake. This is going to be a walk in the park. And we look back, and it was way more difficult than we thought it was going to be. It works both ways. To realize that if you try to see things in God's eyes, if you try to see things according to His perspective, that it helps. It may not be a magic bullet, okay? It may not be. But it's a suggestion that I believe helps a great deal to accept that this is what we have been given for some reason. It says in Hebrews 11, verse 24 and following, I want to read some of this because it's a great example. Think about Moses for a minute. Think about his lot in life, what was given to him. Whether he really wanted it or not, it was given to him. By faith, Moses, when he had come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt. Think about that saying for a minute. For he had respect unto the recompense of the reward. Moses saw a reward that was greater than the treasures of Egypt. Boy, think about the things they dig up almost every day in Egypt and all the, from that ancient culture that existed those thousands of years ago. Gold. Think about King Tut's tomb. All the gold and treasures that they found in all of that. Moses took a look at that and lived in that for the first part of his life, but he gave it all up to suffer with the people of God. According to people that do not look through God's eyes, that only see things from a physical perspective, Moses made a horrible decision. What a terrific, colossal mistake Moses made by giving up all that treasures in Egypt and going out there in the wilderness and suffering with those people. But he esteemed spiritual things to be of more importance than the ability to live in pleasure in this life and to enjoy those things for a limited time. What we go through in this life is limited, and we need to remember that if we have a spiritual perspective on life. If Moses would have not given up the treasures of Egypt, then he would have given up his challenge at real greatness. If he had stayed in Egypt and stayed with the physical treasures and lived a physical life, you wouldn't even know who Moses was. No one would know. His name would not be recorded in history. He would be nothing, zip. Moses is who he is today because of the choice that he made, and we maintain that he did not make a bad choice. He made a fantastic choice. Philippians chapter 4, 11 through 13. Paul, not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. I know both how to be abased, and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I am instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Number 3, live in the present. It's an easy lesson. It's easy to say. Even Jesus said it. In his book, A Way of Life, Sir William Oscar said, if the load of tomorrow be added to that of yesterday and carried today, it will make even the strongest falter. Live in day-typed compartments. Don't let yesterday and tomorrow intrude on your life. Live one day at a time. You'll avoid the waste of energy, the mental distress, the nervous worries that dog the steps of the man who's anxious about the future. Well, Jesus said in Matthew 6, verse 34, which is more important than that often, he said, take therefore no thought for tomorrow, for the tomorrow will take thought of the things of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. There's enough, to paraphrase it, there's enough bad things happening today than to borrow trouble from yesterday or to borrow it from a tomorrow that hasn't happened yet. Yesterday is gone forever. Tomorrow may never come. All we have is today. Jesus said, live today. You know, I don't know, at your household, I don't know who does the dishes. I don't know who scrubs the floors. I don't know who does the yard work. But it doesn't matter, because here's the lesson. No matter who it is, if you had to see all the work at once, think about that. All of the laundry that's going to be done in your entire life. Imagine it being inside of one room. It wouldn't fit in one room, right? Think of all the floors that are going to be swept in your entire life. All the dishes that are going to be washed. All of the lawns mowed. All of the yard. All of it. All of it for your entire life. You would agree with the inchworm. And here's what the inchworm says. He says, inch by inch, it's a cinch. Because yard by yard, it's too hard. Take one day at a time. One day at a time, we can master. We can do that. But if you look at everything all at once, if you borrow from the future, you cannot do it. Be like the inchworm. Inch by inch, it's a cinch. Because yard by yard, it is too hard. Sometimes we even teach our children to live in the future. The preschool kid is enjoying their freedom, but they want to start to school, and they want to go to first grade. Then they want to go to second grade, right? When they're in first grade, it's like, next year I'm going to be a second grader. And that goes on through life, junior, high school. High school, next year I'm going to graduate. I might go to college, or I might go into business. One of these days, I'm going to be happy. I'm going to be married. One of these days, I'm going to be happy, right? Whenever the kids graduate, whenever the kids leave home. One of these days, I'm going to be happy. I'm going to get to retire. One of these days, I'm going to be happy. It's not going to work that way. We never reach that day. We never allow ourselves to reach that day. Be happy today. Always say that in funerals. We say, if you have flowers to give them now. It's too late. I'm not saying that getting flowers at a funeral is a bad thing to do. It's a wonderful thing to do. Funerals are for the family. If you want to give somebody roses, give it to them now while they're alive. Do it today. If you're going to make up with somebody, do it today. Because when you get to that point, it's too late. Because that future may not come at all. We need to, I'm not saying don't plan. I'm just saying don't live in the future. Live in the present. And lastly this morning, can't keep going forever, the last suggestion that I want to make is have a purpose in life. The psychiatrist Viktor Frankl told about his experiences in a concentration camp, how all the men were put into a large building and kept inside of that building. They would feed them once a day. They never had contact with anybody else outside. They would put a container in the center of that room that they were in, and he said after a while, they started living like animals. All the men that were in that concentration camp would just descend upon that box and eat that food. And after a while, a whole bunch of them went insane, absolutely insane. The only people who didn't go insane were people who had an aim in life. They had a goal. They looked forward into the future of having some sort of a life after all this was over. They had a purpose for living, and it made the difference. Paul achieved some great things in life, but it's because he had a goal at the very center of his living. Philippians 3, verse 13 and 14, brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended, but this one thing I do, forgetting those things that are behind, and reaching forth to those things which are before, I press toward the mark of the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. If you do not have a purpose today, God has a purpose for you. There's a reason why you're here. And I got to tell you, I'll call this my opinion, but in reading all the scriptures and everything else, I truly believe with all my heart, it's my opinion, that if you are sitting in the audience today, it's because you have something that God wants you to do. Because once you're done doing everything that God wants you to do in this life, you're out of here. If you're still sitting here, there's still something that He wants you to do. Could be a number of things, and maybe I shouldn't even say what that is. You've got work to do. You have a purpose in your life, and I hope that you will be able to see and realize that purpose in your life. Jesus had a purpose. That's why He came into the world. Matthew 1, verse 21. It is He that shall save His people from his sins. And we're made aware of His love, and the most famous passage in all of the scriptures, for God so loved the world that He sent His only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in Him should not perish, but rather have everlasting life. To close this morning, this is what Longfellow said, poet, writer. Life is real. Life is earnest. And the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, and to dust thou shalt return, was not written of the soul. And we need to remember that in our life. Our life does not consist of the things that we have. Our life is not just physical. Our life is not purposeless. There is something to this life. We are here for a reason. We need to have that aim in our life. Accept the challenge of worthwhile achievement, and you will never stand on that ledge and wonder whether life is not worth living. It is worth living. Depend on God, accept your lot, live in the presence, and have purpose in your life. I hope you find that helpful today. They're not my ideas, they come from Scripture. If someone needs to become a Christian today, if you're a person of faith and you're willing to confess your faith, we can help you become a Christian today and start following Jesus. If you are willing to start following Him and leave all that other stuff behind, you can be baptized into Christ this morning if that's what you want. Or later, if there's in private, if that is something you want to think about. The invitation to become a Christian and to be saved is 24/7. It's not just when we're assembled. So we make that offer. Christians have the ministry of reconciliation. We work for Jesus. We work for God in His mission. And if you're a Christian, you share that mission in the world. If you want to become a Christian, if you can see that that is your purpose, that maybe that's the one thing that you need to do. Maybe that's why you're still here. Because you need to become a Christian, you need to be saved before you're out of here. I've known people that have come up and said, you know what, I'm getting old. It's time to get a roof on this thing, right? Yeah. So maybe that's what you need to do. If you're a Christian, enjoy the forgiveness. Walk with Jesus and enjoy the forgiveness. You're going to make mistakes, but you're going to be forgiven. We keep turning away from the other sinful way of life. And that's the road that we walk on. If you stray from that road, you need the prayers of the church. We offer that as well in public this morning. Or in private, just please let somebody know. But if you want to come forward publicly today, to sit on that front row, nothing special about that, just a signal to us that you want something, prayers or help in our service in some way. Why don't you come forward while we stand and sing?